Hey there, everyone. What would happen if we got rid of all the money in the world? How would humanity survive without it? It's always fun to fantasize about how nice it would be if money wasn't a problem. But have you ever stopped to think about how our society would function without any cash at all? Would people even wake up in the morning if they didn't need to earn a salary to stay alive? How would the economy work without money? Let's find out. 1. People wouldn't have jobs. The first thing that would disappear in a world without money is jobs. Of course, people would still have to work because otherwise no one would do anything. We are not yet at the level of technological development where robots can take care of all the work for us. However, with no jobs comes no salaries, which means people wouldn't have to worry about paying rent or buying food, at least not in the traditional sense. They would only have to worry about surviving, which brings us to point 2. 2. Barter would make a comeback. If people don't get paid for their work, then how will they get what they need to survive? Well, they would likely resort to the oldest form of trade known to man, barter. This is when two people decide to exchange goods or services without the use of money. For example, let's say someone makes chairs and someone else makes delicious cakes. The chair maker could trade one of his chairs to the cake maker for 5 cakes. Sounds simple enough, but there is a big flaw in this system, which is finding someone who both has what you want and needs what you're offering. The chair maker needs a cake, but the cake maker doesn't need a chair. Then the trade can't happen. Also, how would you put a price on a handcrafted chair? Is it worth 3 cakes or 5 cakes? And how do you compare that to the value of something like gold or oil? There isn't an easy way to do this, which is why barter never really caught on after the introduction of currency. 3. Life would be harder than it is now. In many ways, life would be more difficult without money. So we're so used to going to a store, grabbing whatever we want, and paying for it. It's by handing over some bills or cards that we forget that this process actually involves a lot of hard work from a lot of different people. A farmer grows the vegetables you eat. Delivery trucks bring them to the stores. Shop assistants stack them neatly on shelves, and someone cleans the store so you can shop comfortably. Not to mention the people who made your clothes or shoes, or the workers who build roads or bridges. All these jobs are necessary for our modern society to function, and none of them would be possible without money. So, if we got rid of money, life would become a lot harder. You might ask, does this mean that money makes the world go round? After all, everything we consume or use seems to involve money in some way. Well, not quite, but it does play a very important role. 4. The government would need to distribute goods and services. In a world without money, the government would likely need to step in and start distributing goods and services to its citizens. This could either be done directly by employing people to work for the state, or by giving subsidies to private companies who would then provide these services. However, this raises a huge problem, as this system relies heavily on the government, which can easily lead to corruption or abuse of power. Some of the goods and services might not reach those who need them most, and instead could be given to those who can influence the government the best. In a worst-case scenario, the government could simply use its power to force people into working for the state with no pay. Now, while this is unlikely to happen in countries with a functioning democracy, it's not far-fetched to think that a dictator could use a moneyless society to his advantage. 5. The black market would thrive. Criminals would love a world with no money. Anything that cannot be bought or sold legally would be bought and sold illegally. Instead of robbing banks or stores, criminals would simply sell stolen goods on the black market. This might lead to an increase in petty theft, since the consequences for selling stolen goods would be much lower than the current penalties for robbery. On the other hand, though, the demand for illegal drugs might go down, since you would need to trade something valuable for them, unlike the current system where drug dealers accept money, which basically anyone can get. 6. Stockpiling resources would be important. In a world without money, having useful skills would be extremely important. Okay, doctors, mechanics, and farmers would be highly valued members of society. In addition, being able to grow your own food or generate your own energy would be a huge advantage. If you could stockpile food or resources, you would be able to trade them for things you couldn't get yourself. This means that people would try to get as much land as possible to grow food on. They would also try to acquire as many useful skills as possible to help others and get something in return. 7. Banks and credit cards would be useless. It's one of the biggest changes we've seen in the last few decades is the shift away from using cash and toward using credit cards or electronic money transfers. These are convenient ways of paying for things and are often encouraged by governments because they're easier to track. Without money, however, all of this would come crashing down. Banks would become irrelevant overnight, and the credit card industry would cease to exist. While some people might mourn the loss of loyalty points or reward programs, it's unlikely that these things would continue to exist without a monetary system. 8. Entrepreneurship would be impossible. In today's world, entrepreneurs are some of the richest people around. However, this would not be possible without money. Starting a business requires a lot of upfront capital, and without money, investors would have nothing to invest. This means that large-scale projects such as building a factory would not be possible. The same goes for innovation. Without money, who would fund research into new technologies or medicines? Large corporations exist today because they can pool together the money needed to fund these types of endeavors. But without money, this would be impossible. 9. Prices would be meaningless. If you took the dollar bill out of circulation, then the prices we see today would be meaningless. $100 for a TV would make no sense. Without dollars, the TV would either cost 100 apples, 50 loaves of bread, or something else entirely. This means that people would need to carry around wheelbarrows of goods just to buy something small, like a loaf of bread. This is obviously not practical. 10. Time would become more valuable. When we have free time, we often wish we could use it to make money. So it's interesting to think that in a world with no money, time would become the most valuable resource. You could only work for a certain amount of hours each day, and those hours could be spent growing food, taking care of livestock, or making tools. In addition, having knowledge of certain things would be very useful. Being able to fix a plow or harvest crops would be much more valuable than owning some fancy equipment. 11. Capitalism would collapse. Today, our economy is driven by capitalism. The idea that people should be free to own private property and conduct business with little government interference. Capitalism requires money, so it would obviously fall apart without it. Instead, we would likely see a resurgence of socialism or communism. These systems require cooperation between members of society and usually involve the redistribution of goods and services. It's unclear which of these systems would work better without money, as neither has been tried on a large scale. So what do you think? Do you think humans could survive without money? Oh, would our entire civilization collapse without it? If you had to live in a world without money, would you prefer a socialist or a capitalist society? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that thumbs up button. Okay, and don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss an awesome video.